They say you should never burn bridges. It's good advice, but sometimes you don't have to burn the bridge. Sometimes you just have to remind the person standing on it that you own the river it crosses. I spent 25 years building this company. I wasn't the CEO and I wasn't on the board. I was the director of operations. I was the guy who made sure the trucks left on time, the lights stayed on, and the clients were happy. But to the new management, I was just a line item on a spreadsheet, a legacy cost, a dinosaur. Last week, a 28-year-old MBA named Brad fired me because he thought I was too old to understand the modern market. He thought he was cutting dead weight. He didn't realize that the dead weight he was cutting was the only thing holding the roof over his head. Literally. Here is how I evicted my own boss. I started at this logistics firm back when cloud storage meant a filing cabinet in a damp basement. I survived 3 mergers, 2 recessions, and more restructuring phases than I care to count. About 10 years ago, the company hit a rough patch. Cash flow was tight, the banks were closing in. The original owner, a good man named Robert, was desperate. He needed liquid cash to make payroll. But all the company's capital was tied up in real estate, specifically the massive warehouse and office complex we operated out of. I had done well for myself over the years. I lived below my means, invested wisely, and had a significant amount of capital sitting around. So I made Robert a deal. I bought the building from the company. It was a win-win. Robert got the cash to save the company, and I got a solid real estate investment. We signed a long-term commercial lease. The company would pay me rent, and they would continue to operate there as usual. But because I'm not an idiot, and because I know how corporate boards operate when money gets involved, I added a very specific addendum to the lease, a key man clause. It stated simply, this favorable lease rate is contingent on the continued employment of the landlord, Callen, within the tenant company. Should employment be terminated without cause, the lease becomes voidable at the landlord's discretion with 30 days' notice. Robert signed it, laughed, and said, "We'd be crazy to fire you anyway." Well, Robert retired 2 years ago, and the new board brought in Brad. Brad was the kind of manager who used buzzwords to hide the fact that he didn't know how the business actually worked. He talked about synergy and disruptive workflows, but he couldn't tell you the difference between a bill of lading and a packing slip. From the moment he arrived, I was a target. I'm 62. I don't use Slack for everything. I pick up the phone because it's faster. I don't need a project management app to tell me where the fleet is. I know the drivers by name. Brad hated that. "You're stuck in the past," he told me in our first meeting. "We need to digitize. We need to get younger. We need energy." He started moving my responsibilities to a 22-year-old intern. He stopped inviting me to strategy meetings. He moved my office from the corner to a smaller room near the break room. It was classic constructive dismissal. He wanted me to quit so they wouldn't have to pay severance. I didn't quit. I just did my job. So, last Friday, he called me into his office. He didn't even have the decency to look me in the eye. He was staring at his iPad. "We're letting you go," he said. "We're restructuring the operations department. We feel your skill set is, no longer compatible with our vision for the future." I sat there for a moment. I looked around the office. My office. The walls I had painted. The HVAC system I had personally repaired 3 years ago to save the company 10 grand. "Are you sure about this, Brad?" I asked calmly. "Have you checked the company files, specifically the facility contracts?" He scoffed. "I don't need to check the files to know we need to cut costs. You're the most expensive employee in the department. It's just math. Please have your desk cleared by 5 p.m. I stood up. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. "Okay, Brad, you're the boss." I packed my box. I said goodbye to the few people who actually mattered. The drivers, the warehouse guys, the receptionist. They were crying. I told them not to worry. I walked out to my truck, drove home, and poured myself a glass of scotch. Then I opened my safe and pulled out the deed to the property and the original lease agreement. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't need one. I know how to write a formal notice. I drafted a letter. It wasn't a wrongful termination lawsuit. It was much simpler. To Tech Logistics Management. From Callen, property owner. Notice to vacate. Per Clause 14, Section B of the Commercial Lease Agreement dated 2015, the favorable lease terms were contingent on the employment of the landlord. Following the termination of my employment on Friday, October 14th, this letter serves as formal notice that the lease is hereby voided. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. Failure to vacate will result in immediate legal action and trespassing charges.
I signed it, I scanned it, and just to be sure, I had a process server to deliver it by hand on Monday morning. I wasn't there on Monday, but my friend in accounting told me exactly what happened. At 9 a.m., the process server walked into the lobby and asked for the director. Brad came out, looking smug, probably thinking he had successfully trimmed the fat. He took the envelope. He opened it in the lobby. My friend said Brad's face went from pink to white in about 3 seconds. He read it again. He started shaking. You see, in our industrial zone, vacancy rates are less than 1%. There are no other warehouses available. Moving a logistics company, with its servers, its fleet, its inventory, takes 6 months of planning, not 30 days. And even if they could find a place, the rent would be double what I was charging them. At 9:15 a.m., my phone rang. It was Brad. I let it go to voicemail. At 9:20 a.m., it rang again. Brad, voicemail. At 9:45 a.m., the CEO called. I've known the CEO for years, but he's been hands-off lately, letting Brad run the show. I answered. "What is this?" the CEO screamed. "You're evicting us?" "I'm not evicting you, John," I said calmly. "I'm just exercising my rights as a landlord. My tenant decided to cut ties with me. I'm just accepting the breakup." "Brad fired you?" "He did. Said I was too old. Said my skill set wasn't compatible with the vision. Since I'm no longer an employee, I figure I should stop subsidizing your rent. I have a new tenant lined up who is willing to pay market rate. They move in next month." I didn't have a new tenant, but he didn't know that. "Fix this," John said. "Name your price." I told John I had no interest in coming back to work. I was too old, remember? I wanted to enjoy my retirement. However, I was willing to negotiate a new lease for the company, provided a few conditions were met. First, the rent was going up to current market value. That's a 40% increase. That wiped out every penny Brad saved by firing me, and then some. Secondly, I wanted a guaranteed 5-year contract. Apparently, making a mistake that cost the company $200,000 a year in increased rent is not compatible with the vision either. Now, I want to hear from you. Was I too harsh by raising the rent on the company, or did Brad get exactly what he deserved for trying to kick me out? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. And if you've ever had a manager who thought you were too old to be useful, hit that like button. It helps get this story out to more people who understand the value of experience. I'm Callen. Subscribe for more stories where the old guard wins. See you in the next one.